So now let's jump into our discussion with our distinguished guest. Dr. Bullard, this issue is not new. You've been working on environmental justice for 40 years. But it appears we're at a different moment in history. We're in the midst of a climate emergency, and here in America, in the midst of a reckoning on climate justice. What do you see as different in this moment in history, and what do you hope for?
Well, you're right. I have been working on this for decades, and I think it's important to understand that we've made progress over the years, and we've seen incremental change. But I think the time that we are living in today, with these converging multiple threats that are coming down on communities all across this country, I think people are realizing that we just can't tackle one of these issues at a time because they are all interrelated. And we're now connecting the dots between economic justice, climate justice, health, all of those issues, clean energy, talking about transportation. And so with this new awakening, I think this is an era of opportunity. And because we have, my generation is baby boomer generation, but today, millennials and younger outnumber my generation. The millennials and younger, that's the majority. And that new majority and that emerging power that's embedded in that new majority, they have fewer wedge issues. They have the technology, they have the social networking, they have all kinds of ways of communicating that will make this journey, this quest for justice, realized. So I'm very optimistic, and I want to be in there when we cross the finish line.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bullard. Dr. Jane Goodall in the previous segment mentioned how young people across the world are rising to the challenge, and we need to rise with them. And President McCarthy, both you and Dr. Bullard highlighted how the climate crisis is also a public health crisis, especially for environmental justice communities, the most vulnerable across the world. But we find ourselves now in a global pandemic that is highlighting the disproportionate impacts among environmental justice communities. What do you think are the most important actions we can take here in America and across the world to answer the call for action during this climate emergency and this public health emergency?
Well, Kathy, you're absolutely right that climate change is a public health challenge. It's a crisis. I think one of the challenges that we've always faced is in our anxiety to get things moving. We haven't properly, at least in the U.S., engaged the people in ways that they could understand it and understand its relevance. That's no longer a challenge. There are many lessons that I think people in the United States have learned from COVID-19 that will be important lessons to underpin our opportunity to move forward quickly on climate change. Well, I think people now know that they need to pay attention to the science. When you don't, it matters. We need to focus on listening to science experts, not politicians talking about the science. And we need to really focus on how we bring proper leadership in the U.S. and across the world on these issues, because the world can change in a moment. Our lives have so changed that people realize their vulnerability. They can't have their heads in the sand. And one of the great things about today is that people now know that climate change isn't a planetary problem. It is a people problem. So it's a public health problem of planetary proportions, but they can do something. And they feel now that they can demand solutions that are already available to us. And my mom always used to, when I was a kid, shop for things where you got a 2-for-1 sale or a 3-for-1 sale, because we didn't have that much money. And what I want to do with climate is exactly the same thing. I don't want to just lower greenhouse gas emissions. I want to do it in a way that's going to bring health benefits, that's going to make people safer, that's going to allow us to improve a challenge that is one of our biggest national security challenges. And I want to do it in a way that brings the communities that have been left out at the forefront of the benefits. And so we can do so much more moving forward. So people are scared today, but they also know that climate change is real. They see it, they feel it, they taste it. I'm not suggesting that COVID-19 was beneficial in any way. All I'm suggesting is that we have a new understanding of how we need to work together. Because if we fail to do that, we can find ourselves living lives that we never expected and simply do not want. And so I'm frankly very optimistic that this has made the American people understand that our path out of the pandemic is one that pays attention to the science and listens to the experts. And our way out of the economic challenge we now face because of the pandemic is a clean energy future. It is the only thing that is going to get you those immediate health benefits, that's going to help the communities left behind if you focus on maximizing every dollar to get those health benefits. And it's also going to grow jobs where we know jobs were growing faster, more than 70% faster than the overall economy, which is in the clean energy sector. So I'm excited about the opportunity for every dollar that's spent to stimulate our economy to be focused on the communities that have been left behind. So we deal with equity and justice and health, and we move our country forward. And once again, rejoin the Paris Agreement, and once again, show some leadership in the international community. It is within our cusp, if we do the right thing in terms of how we move our country forward out of this pandemic. And people want it. You can feel it. I think we can all feel it.